As we gather on these holiest of days for reflection and worship, I want to extend to you a word of greeting and of gratitude. This year's gospel reading from the Gospel of Mark for Easter always strikes me as an odd one, ending as it does. So they fled the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. It sounds like a bad joke. The greatest event in the history of the world happens, and the response is silence and fear. We know, though, by faith, that it is really a joke. It is God's great April Fool joke, that because of God's action, it's not the cross that is the last word, but the empty tomb. Not death, but life. And not fearful silence, but joyful celebration, singing of hymns, shouts of Alleluia, and the sharing of the good news of the resurrection from generation to generation. We live in a time where we know what it is to be seized by silence. We're no strangers to fear and terror. We look around the world and we see that more people are refugees because of war and disaster than at any time since the Second World War. We live in a world of abundance, and yet we know people starve to death daily and die for lack of access to clean water. In our own country, we send our children to school to learn and hear of them being massacred in acts of violence. And yet none of these is the last word. By faith, we know that we are God's April Fools. We are the Easter Fools, whose prayers and actions, whose work and whose gifts, whose lives mean that all that bad news is not the last word, that the last word is the good news of hope and resurrection. I want you to know, as you gather this weekend for reflection and for celebration and worship, that you are so much appreciated. Please, as you gather, be encouraged by all that you do. Be filled with joy at the reality that the gospel of the resurrection is ours, that there is no death that is the end, but life. Hear words of gratitude from we who get to be your partners in ministry, and from those countless lives you transform and touch, lives that you save by your prayers and works and gifts. You are making a difference in the world. Together, we get to be God's punchline. We get to be God's Easter Fools. We get to make a difference and repeat God's last word. As you gather, know that my prayers are with you. May God bless you in your celebration and in your worship, and may in these holy days and always you live to echo the truth that Christ is risen. He is risen indeed.